Earlier today I hit a small piece of stone that was in the bark of a tree, and you can really see the damage it's done to the chain tooth here. It's pretty much caved in the whole of the top plate and some of the side plate here, and just there, if you can see the working corner here, the critical part of the chain is bent right over, so the chain is effectively totally dulled. Looking down at the top plate, again the damage is pretty clear, and you can see to rescue the chain we need to take this chain back to the clean metal here. So all of this needs to disappear, and that's why a lot of people throw chains away. But it is quite easily possible to rescue a chain that's hit metal or stones. The first job we need to do is clear the bulk of this metal out the way quickly. The best way I found for doing that is the Gramberg 12-volt handheld type grinder. You can see there's a few shavings around here, but already we've got the tooth nicely and quickly cut back to the shape we want it. I'd like to get rid of these burrs on the chain, and the best way I find for doing that is just to cut a few pieces of wood with the chainsaw. So now we can see from just running the chainsaw and cutting some bits of wood, a lot of that burring and bits of metal that was hanging off the top plate and the side plate has now disappeared. So now we move on to, we need to use a filing guide now to get all the teeth the same length. So the next stage is to measure the depth gauges. Now the depth gauges are these little fellas here, and they go just in front of the chain tooth and feed the wood up into the cut working corner and rest of the top plate. After you've got all the teeth the same length, you then take this little device. This is the Oregon version. As we saw from the chain, it's 0.025 of an inch that we want to take the difference between the depth gauges and the top of the cutter plate. So when we put that on there, just here we can see this little piece of depth gauge here peeping out through our depth gauge measure. So we need to take that off so it is level with this depth gauge, and then the right amount of wood will feed up into the chain, which is cutter head, which is just up here. Okay, now I'm going to file the depth gauges. Now we've taken some strokes off the depth gauge, and you can just see the depth gauge portion here, and you can see it is level with the depth gauge setter here, and that's exactly what we want. So now as the wood travels up and into the top plate here, we know that this difference is 0.025 of a thou, and that's the difference that we're looking for. We're going to ramp them. So here we can see the depth gauge without the ramping, and here we can see the depth gauge where we ramped it off to help feed the wood into the tooth. But it's quite a subtle difference, and it's not going to make a huge difference to how the saw cuts. It's more fine tuning.